Canvas announcements, so you should have seen it come up. Can you all access that? What about people at home?
We can access it.
Yeah, oh great, fantastic. Okay, so the readings for this week are really interesting. And, you know, I guess in some ways there are critical questions that are asked by anthropologists, particularly social anthropologists, that have worked from grounds of struggle and alongside have a kind of more proximate relationship, and ask them or make some interrogations about how we understand politics, how we understand the political. And so today, I want us to spend a little bit of time first sort of talking about that issue. I'm just going to bring up the slides. Okay, good. Make sure that I'm sharing them for those at home. Hello. So, all right, I'm going to have to minimize this so we can see. Can we all see the slides okay at home? So I've been yeah? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I'm not sure. I don't think you did it in present mode yet, right? It's just the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I've just got the first, I haven't uploaded it online yet. I've just got the first slide on. This week's lecture topic is entitled Territory, Political Ontologies of Nature, Sentipensar as Method in Indigenous and Afro-descendant struggles. Now these struggles are very cited, in particular territories. They don't necessarily depend on collective action frameworks oriented merely on identity or even on environmental politics. They erupt in the context of what's been called socio-environmental conflict in Latin America and the so-called eco-territorial turn. Hello there. And I have a few images that I've put up on that first slide. I'll take the sunglasses off. And you'll get a sense of actually what and where they are. Can you see those all right? You can see a beautiful mountain range with a body of water, quite crystalline water. This is the mountain known as Ausengate, yeah? So a little bit about Ausengate. It's a mountain of, I don't know if you can see that text, Vilcanota, mountain range in the Andes of Peru. It is situated around 100 k's southeast of Cusco, in the Cusco region, Canchis province, Pitumarca district. So first we have the mountain, the prominence of this incredibly high, elevated mountain. Under that you can see a mural, which is from Buenaventura, a city in the Pacific coast of Colombia, yeah? And this mural is called 450 Years of the Cosmos, to the Cosmos. And it sort of maps out the cultures and the histories of the Pacific port of Buenaventura, yeah? So there's another image. You can sort of see mangrove swamps. You can see an Indigenous woman in the center caring for a child. You'd need to really see it in greater detail, but there's a range of social actors from past and present. There's the sun, there's the moon, there's the planets. 450 years to the cosmos. In the top right, you can see the Galpi River in the Cauca department, which is in the Pacific coast region as well. And in the bottom right, you can see a march in defense of Quilish. Quilish is the site, or was the site, of the Newport mine, yeah, or the Yanacocha mine, gold mine in northern Peru. And so I've deliberately put these images here to get us to think about place, space, how particular geographies have become the grounds of action and activism, but particularly to rethink how we see these spaces. Yeah, so if we can look at them as places of nature, that's kind of almost like a postcard image, yeah, of some far-off jurisdiction that's removed from civilization, yeah? But in fact, these are worlds. These are worlds that people inhabit with other living beings, that people see as important to their life worlds, their well-being, their livelihood, and who they are as people. Yeah? Political activism has emerged, for example, in the face of struggles around territory, around extractivism, an important domain of new political emergence in Latin America. But as I kind of intimated before, particularly in regard for the readings this week, the three, we have one from Marisol de la Cadena on earth beings, yeah? We have another one by Ulrich Ausländer, which deals with this context of riverine communities on the Rio Galpi, and the way in which those communities interacted with a new mechanism provided by a new law to form into community councils, yeah, whereby their identity as Afro-Colombians who were reclaiming the right to land title for territory is central to their political process. And we also have a reading that takes in the scales and rhetorics around anti-mining struggle, particularly in Peru, but not exclusively. Because even though some of these forms of political emergence are quite localized, quite regional, some of the visions, some of the worldviews on which they depend, their ideas about humans and non-humans, and the need to actively defend, for example, the earth beings and the social ecologies in which they are immersed, have spread to other locales. So beyond Peru to neighboring Argentina, beyond Peru to Colombia, especially around the concept of the right to consultation. So I want us to think in this domain, in this space, to provoke questions about what is seen as political, what is in the political field, what inhabits this field. Yeah? I want us to rethink somewhat our optics on the horizons of struggle, including, as I said, for those involved in socio-environmental conflict in the so-called eco-territorial turn. But through the lens of understanding such mobilization, such action as being important, not just as a repertoire of opposition or resistance, for example, to mining or other extractivist, I can't even speak today, extractivist projects, but also as vital to the constitution of new forms of political articulation amongst different groups, yeah? And different visions, not just of their world, but also visions of well-being, of development. And visions that they actually want to performatively bring into being the worlds they want to give continuity to, and the worlds that they want to guarantee the existence of, yeah, bring into being. So whilst these particular struggles, particularly in the context of extractivism, and we can see there a map of different zones, frontiers of extractivism worldwide, whereby what is in red is labelled as Indigenous territory, and what is in yellow as examples of the presence of mining and logging companies. And there's definitely an overlap. In this context, we can understand struggles within the language of anti-neoliberal mobilizations, of course, resistances to neoliberalism, as we've been talking about in this unit, but they can't entirely be framed or explained by the usual kinds of social movement rationalities, even some activist rationalities, whether they be environmentalist or leftist. They're not reducible to these. They might partake of, be involved in those domains of discourse and framing against extractivism, against neoliberalism, but they're not exhausted. They're not accounted for adequately by the common frames that understand these struggles as only about environmentalism or only about leftist grassroots struggle. Indigenous and Afro-descendant peoples show entanglements in the political formation of territory. Now, this is a very important word that I've put in red, which kind of coincides with the red of Indigenous peoples up on this map of the world. And here, I don't want to just foreground Latin America. We need to think on a global scale as well. As pertains to Latin America, we need to think of Indigenous and Afro-descendant groups. And latterly, how, for example, in the case of the 1990s in Colombia, the politicization of communities does not just revolve around blackness or being Afro-descendant, but also being in territory, yeah? So territory as the social ecology, the grounds for continuity of particular practices, life worlds, models of development and well-being that do not sit easily into identity politics on the one hand or material concerns on the other. Notwithstanding the fact that these are very material contexts, yeah? For example, in the realm of mining exploitation or hydroelectric schemes and dams, fracking, yeah? That map there doesn't even detail those kinds of extractivist frontiers. Also, the use of land by even green neoliberal logics for growing crops such as canola or soy to create biofuels. The issue of land, as we've seen in this unit, is so fundamental, yeah, to struggles and to antagonisms that emerge. So thinking otherwise, Indigenous and Afro-descendant peoples show entanglements in the political formation of territory.
When you said it like moves beyond identity politics, how does it? Is it so concerned with Indigenous and Afro-descendant identity?
Entangled with, but moving beyond. So the way that commonly, from a northern perspective, identity politics is understood is along kind of axes that may overlap if we have an intersectional lens, or may even become singled out as frames for political action, but mainly refer to struggles over cultural misrecognition, yeah, the domain of the cultural. Now that's a big discussion, right, that we could have. And whilst struggles for cultural rights and recognition are important to Indigenous and Afro-descendant peoples in Latin America, if we just keep our view at the level of identity, we're potentially complicit with the kind of neoliberal appropriations of identity, yeah, and not looking at those deeper structural issues that, of course, are formed from the foundational kinds of categories that give meaning to race, yeah, give meaning to forms of social difference and differentiation historically. We don't want to be beholden to just collective identity frames in a way that removes from view the question of territory. if we do so, if we have a limited identity politics framework, in fact, in a way, we're involved by occluding a view on territory in another form of theoretical dispossession. Yeah? Thinking otherwise is thus important. I don't want to say identity isn't important. We could think, as these particular anthropologists suggest, in terms of entanglements with different political frames and different fields of the political. But it is important for us to think about space and place. It's important for us to think about land as an ontology and an epistemology, not just in terms of cultural difference, which neoliberal multiculturalism is kind of geared to that. Cultural rights, language rights, recognition. Oh, but don't make demands on the state for land, right? Celebrate difference in a multicultural term, but deny the very class realities that have become more complex, yeah, under neoliberalism itself, and new forms of economic precaritization that Indigenous peoples, the Afro-descendant peoples, are also subject to, including when they have to migrate from ancestral lands in search of work, including when they're caught up in cycles of internal conflict and militarization and have to flee villages. They might be internally displaced, for example, in the context of Colombia. So it's not enough to just be beholden to one frame or another. Here I want us to think about how we think, yeah? So I'm quite enamored of this particular quotation, and I've used it in a few different units. But this is from Viviane Namaste's Oversight, Critical Reflections on Feminist Politics. So she's a Quebecois scholar, and this is a book that was published in Toronto, Canada. And she thinks about the frames that activists use, that scholars use as well, what they permit us to see, what they might preclude in thinking about the political and the social, yeah? And she formulates in this book this notion of oversight, or sort of leans on it, to understand oversight in a couple of different but important ways. The notion of oversight refers to that which has been ignored, the day-to-day realities that remain unexplored by scholars and activists, the stories that have yet to be told. Here, oversight is used to designate what is yet to be made visible. Yet, I also use oversight in a second sense, specifically to refer to understanding the ways in which what appears visible has been overdetermined by specific social, activist, cultural, and economic contexts. Here, then, the focus is not on what cannot be seen. Rather, the idea is to interrogate how and why issues are made visible in particular ways in scholarly contexts. The notion of oversight can be understood as a practice of erasure and occultation, absence, as well as one of visibilization or even hyper-visibilization from a specific ideological and epistemological lens. So this speaks to what is present, but also what is missing in a field of vision. So when we talk about eco-territorial socio-environmental struggles, and we talk about Indigenous and Afro-descendant activists, if we use one frame but don't enable others to be also co-present, given the kinds of entanglements that they and all people have in social struggle, then are we over-determining through our very frameworks what can be understood as the political? Because such forms of political protagonism are sometimes spearheaded by terms of reference, visions of the world, which are not, those that we find amongst scholars who talk about opposition to neoliberalism, who talk about identity politics. In fact, even identity and culture might be terms that, when translated, have different meanings to communities. So we have to be very attentive to this potential dynamic within research, but also within arguably some activist framing, including on the left, that understands struggles in particular ways, but maybe precludes a vision of why people might be involved in struggle. What's at stake? Okay, so here it's necessary, I suppose, to talk about not just epistemology, the politics of knowing, but also the politics of being, ontology. And Mario Blaser is an anthropologist that's very interested in this idea of world making and life worlds and worlds otherwise. And he talks about ontology as being assumptions that may be implicit or explicit about what kinds of things can or do exist, what are their conditions of existence, relations of dependency, and so on. With reference in particular to assemblages of relations between the human and the non-human, drawing upon, as he does, post-humanist critique. He asks the question in this particular article that I'm drawing on, what are the objects of the political? What are the sorts of relations that are foundational to politics? He talks about what he terms a political ontology, certain political sensibility, a problem space, a modality of analysis or critique. This political sensibility speaks to a commitment to pluriverse, to worlds otherwise. But there's not just one way of doing politics. There's not even just one field of the political. The problem space, the dynamics through which different worlds or ontologies bring themselves into being, interact, interfere, and mingle with each other. The analysis or critique side is how in our forms of activism, in our forms of doing and working together, we're involved in a species of reality making, yeah? One's own participation in that reality has to be brought to account. They are one's ontological commitments. Political ontologies otherwise actively seek to assert themselves into the monological setting that takes for granted that there's just one world and one world view. For example, scientific, materialist, neoliberal. And it's just simply out there. By the eruption into the political field of ontologies otherwise, actors seek to produce and reproduce other worlds. So never has the context of territorio and tierra been more important in this world making and this political ontology. Concepts like territorio have been radically reinvented by contemporary social movements in Latin America that have specifically and explicitly mobilized territory in tension with the post-colonial neoliberal state. For Indigenous movements, sometimes invoking the International Labour Organization's convention that you can see up there, covered up by that little talking 167, and the UN Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, 2017. Okay, territorio is produced, though, using this kind of ontology framework through strategies for constructing autonomy with and from modern territory, often striving towards horizontal power relations and collective forms of governance. Struggles over the domain of territory for the political freedom to appropriate space cannot be separated from struggles over the right to occupy and produce land. A key focus of Latin American social movements. This also implies the coexistence of multiple ideas and practices of territory and land in contention. Land contains values that exceed modern property relations and exchange value. So this is from the work of Sam Alvorsen. He's a Scandinavian scholar, but he seeks to try to grapple with the limits of kind of Western thinking about territory. The multidimensionality of meanings of territory, particularly in what I've been calling the eco-territorial turn, but also in spaces that are shared with earth beings. Now that comes from Marisol de la Cadena, right? And relations between living things, responsibilities and ethics of care, and also the rights of nature. So in Ecuador's 2008 constitution, the rights of nature were enshrined in law. It's the first place in the world where that's been the case. Did you know that? That's actually been the grounds of a lot of class action suits as well in the country. The territory of black communities along the Colombian Pacific, for example, shows that territory is shaped by multiple human and non-human presences. And the context of the mangrove is really interesting. Has anyone been up to Newcastle, Central Coast, and seen mangroves? Sort of between worlds. What we see on the surface and then what lies underneath. It's a whole ecosystem. But this is what Auslander calls the aquatic space. Yeah? The fluvial movement of the river as being formative of social ecologies, but also the ground for political ontologies for Afro-descendant Colombians in the Pacific. Obviously, also anti-extractivist resistance is making use of new languages of valuation, and I borrow that term from Maristela Svampa, the Argentine sociologist, remaking concepts of land and territory as a giver of life and livelihood in the face of what is called by such activists extractivist death, or projects of death, right? Feminist decolonial analysis, as we'll see in a couple of weeks, emphasizes the embodied production and experience of territory for Afro-descendant and Indigenous women, summarized in the notion of body territory, cuerpo, territorio. It also connects femicide violence to the incursion of capital and economic interests onto that land, including via mining projects. Now, obviously, this new set of languages around territory and territory as the space for new political ontologies that also make use of ancestral notions of land and place was made possible by the so-called multicultural turn. And I mentioned a little bit multiculturalism, the concept of multiculturalism, particularly coinciding with neoliberalism in Latin America, whereby, to quote Yashar, new regimes of citizenship, spaces of citizenship were made possible through either the adoption in constitutions of some form of cultural and collective rights recognition for Indigenous and Afro-descendant peoples in different nations. Some of those involved self-government rights and the right to customary law. Some countries also adopted ILO 169 that I referred to before, even affirmative action policies. So there's definitely been that kind of change, which has created new grounds, right, of possibility. But it's a checkered record. And most nation states, just like the nation state of Australia, have signed on to conventions and international law under the pressure of international activists, yeah? I've referred to the rights of nature. Also, this common discourse in multiple sites of Pachamama, especially across the Andes. Notions, have you heard of the notion of summa causae before? That's also enshrined in the Bolivian constitution. Yeah? Living well. It's hard to translate from Quechua and Aymara terms because it encompasses seeing society and nature as being a unity, actually, right? Where society is not outside of nature, but the principles of balance that govern nature should also govern a society that functions well. Now, both Bolivia and Ecuador have had these foundational constitutions that have enacted quite new visions of the political. Yeah, and obviously have also created grounds for contention, especially where so-called new rights guaranteed are not respected by the incumbent states. Meanings of citizenship that might be pluricultural and plurinational, rather than just one nation, one culture, one language, for example. But territory is more complex than meets the eye. The ILO and UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and those incumbent constitutional processes I referred to kick-started many processes of territorialization, but their outcome and even processes of governance aren't freestanding or necessarily representative of all actors and worldviews. So we have to understand that diversity. Yes, I spoke before about entanglements, and times quite contradictory entanglements. Governance is not just a de facto adaptation of existing forms of social organisation over territory, it involves a reconfiguration. Some places do not have a history of communal land titling, but for instance, as we see in the context of the riverine communities in Rio Galpi in Colombia and the Pacific coast, are brought into that process because they're motivated by particular interests, to title their land. They're interpolated, and one might even see this as being part and parcel of the neoliberal multicultural statecraft that Colombia and other nations in Latin America from the 80s, 90s onwards are involved in. But it's uneven. So for mining and other extractivism, this can also imply new subjects under formation, new forms of political subjectivation, and antagonism. I'm drawing on the work of Modernesi there, right? Okay, now, so when we're talking about these political ontologies, we're at heart talking about not just visions of nature and society, but also relationalities between the two, the ecologies, social and natural, of peoples, the places of rivers and social topographies and relations, hydro-relations, it's being called. Dam projects commonly refigure or interrupt, even usurp or destroy existing hydrosocial and socio-ecological relations, or what in Spanish is called el tejido social. You'll see that a lot. An example is the Hidro-Sogamoso project in Sogamoso River, Department of Santander in the northeast of Colombia, and also the Hidro-Ituango dam project in Antioquia. There's an active network in Colombia that straddles those two sites in contention around the dams, and it's called Movimientos Ríos Vivos, the Living Rivers movement, Similarly, mining projects can reconfigure and interrupt, even usurp or destroy socio-ecological relations, but not only that, also obviously ecologies, natural ecologies. But really, in this field of political ontology, what's at stake is the question of social reproduction, the process by which a society of peoples reproduces itself from one generation to another, right? Thus, the importance of organising on territory, mobilising the concept of territory. What about when this involves mobilising non-human entities? That is definitely a new way of thinking about worlds and what's in our world, the objects of the political, the subjects of the political, actually. Dam and mining projects can reconfigure and interrupt, even usurp and destroy socio-ecological relations, as I said, but not only. For some anti-dam and anti-mining actors, they can also threaten non-human entities themselves, because they exist. They exist, and that might be mountain or water entities. Okay, so we don't have a huge amount of time, but can I get maybe a few people in those amongst us and also at home to talk about Marisol de la Cadena's article, Indigenous Cosmopolitics in the Andes, in reference to some of those questions? Even if it's the person next to you and you might type in a few ideas from the article. Also, Ulrich Oslander's mobilising the aquatic space, the forming of community councils, So the link, as I said, is up on Google Docs. We also have Gustafsson and Guzman Solano's mining movements and political horizons in the Andes, articulation, democratization, and worlds otherwise. The questions around De la Cadena's article are these. See if you can come up with some ideas from your own reading of that article. So if you want to, anyone want to concentrate particularly on De la Cadena? Even if it means looking at the article itself, Lily? Okay. She proposes extending the political to account for the eruption of entities into the political space, non-human entities. These are increasingly called upon in anti-mining and anti-extractivist protests in general in Peru, but not only Peru. In what ways is the presence of earth beings in protests and accounting for opposition to mines excessive, seen as excessive, an excess for liberal politics? She holds that, just, you know, for even like those who are in government, such as Alan Garcia, it's seen as an invention, you know, and not something real, an excess, something that can't fit in the political. But for those who mobilize these entities, they are central, right? So how might we account for that? That's the first question. De La Cadena talks of partial connections, hybrid political tactics, and even what she calls equivocations. How do you understand these terms? I think equivocations is really interesting, that something can mean two things at the same time, or you can be between one world and another. Yeah? And it involves key mobilizing concepts that link different groups. 3, in what ways does cosmopolitics, implied by the new antagonisms between nature, politics, and the social, require a new analytical toolkit? And then 4, she understands one way of looking at these different interlapping worlds as something that we can see through the fractal. Okay? Who wants to look at Ausländer? All right, so he considers political ontologies for Afro-Colombian groups, the place-based and also fluid. As part of his insistence on locating social movements in relation to localities and space. How does he trace the genealogies of space and relational ontologies in regard to riverine societies? And then we have the place of the ILO Convention 169 and UNDRIP in regard to territory and self-governance, including right to land, consultation, cultural rights, constitutional change. How was Law 70 instrumental? Can you talk a little bit about that? And then what about this one? Fantastic. Gustafsson and Guzman. They understand the process of articulation in anti-mining struggles in the Andes in an interesting way. You might return to that notion of articulación that we referred to in week 2. Number 2, what groups or organizations are given as examples of articulación or articulation in anti-mining struggles? And so on. So see what you can, you know, just in your deliberations. Depending on whether you've got the reactions, right?
And that's a quick question. How did you do anything with the algorithm or Rahama? Like, was it recognized by Syria or anything like that?
Honestly, I have to say that that's a question that hasn't been in other questions.
Yeah.
So we can say it provides a new framing and a new way of making sense of rights, but it doesn't guarantee. Yeah. Yeah. So nation sets out the people under pressure. And you know, it's not something that is uniformly guaranteed. Yeah. So without talking specifically about the case of Rahab, yeah.
But even the Kurdish independence is not every company.
It does provide a language to groups internationally to lobby.
Yeah.
Definitely. So when states have taken along some conventions and so on, then this is avenues for lobbying. But, you know, I mean, Peru's a good example. There's been so many conflicts around mining, clearly, Peru. But, for example, even with the guarantees to increase self-autonomy, the project of self-autonomy for the one convention, the Amazonian learners in Peru, is something that had to be fought for to maintain. But after we made the constitution and state in the rights language in 2009. And so, on paper, it looks like Peru would respect those guarantees. But then there's the soft soil. Then there's the desire to come into people's land and to subvert those constitutional guarantees.
This is not back here in Australia. This is not back here in Australia.
Yeah, yeah. I know someone who was involved in the drafting of the UNDRIP,
Yeah.
who's an people at home, sorry, I don't want to forget you. You can also have a go at the Google Doc on one particular reading. Lily, did you have a question or comment? Yeah. Oh, that was my friend and esteemed colleague Irene Watson. She's got a great book that's called Raw Law. Raw Law. It's really good. She's a really, really good Aboriginal legal scholar. So not to forget you people at home. How are we going? Nathan?
Yes.
So are you having a go at maybe some of those questions from one of the readings?
Yeah, I'm trying to go for the Villa Cadena one.
Okay, good. And what about you, Alice?
I'm going for the last one because the first two, it says access is denied when I click on the link, so...
Oh, that's strange.
Yeah. I don't know if it's my problem or...
I'm fine, so...
Oh wait, actually it works now. Okay, never mind. Yeah,
I don't know what happened. Sorry about that.
thank you.
So see if you can put some thoughts down in that doc. 'Cause
Yeah,
I'd like
okay.
to get us thinking, weaving and interweaving some responses. Did you all get to watch Daughter of the Lake for today? Okay, if you have a tutorial with me just after now, we'll hopefully talk a little bit about that documentary, which is from Peru. If you have your tutorials with Nicole, you have time up your sleeves and you can watch it tonight. So the film Hija de la Laguna, which is Daughter of the Lake, follows the story of Nelida, who's from a small farming community outside of the capital of Cajamarca in Peru. And she herself has been studying law for 5 years, and she's involved in the struggle against the mine there. She's a water protector. Her name is Nelida, but the film is called Daughter of the Lake, and it's in the tutorial activities page. You have to download it though and open it with VLC. You got it? Oh no, it's just that for that film there are versions without subtitles, and so I wanted to, if you can go in there. Sometimes I think you hear languages apart from Spanish. Let's not forget that. So maybe there's actually a whole segment of the account of a jewelry maker and why she's interested in gold, and she speaks in English. So, okay. So we, like I know that this could take a whole hour to input thoughts in response to the questions, but I think that this is very rich scholarship from these social anthropologists. We didn't talk about sentipensar. How remiss of me. Okay, if you saw the topic in context, there's a really nifty quote about what is sentipensar. It's not just thinking via emotions, although it is that, and understanding that there's a relationship between the emotions and the way we think. Activists who are impelled by emotional connections are also involved in a kind of rationality of its own. It's also the relationship that one has to, in this instance, territory. Yeah, and so in the film Hija de la Laguna, Daughter of the Lake, there are many moments where Nelida, a young activist, is very emotional about how she feels having to leave, for example, her chakra, her village, and how she feels about the mining, how she feels her responsibility to the spirit of the lake, right? So sentipensar is a different form of doing and being and thinking. It arose first as a kind of concept amongst Afro-Colombian fishermen and fisherwomen. In Colombia. Probably there's quite a bit of thinking going on. And anyone at home, you're still welcome to input some thoughts to those questions. Sentipensando, no? Feel thinking. I hope that we've been able to do some of that today. So, look, we should probably draw things to a close because we're coming up to the hour. Do come back to this document. I'll have a look at it as well. I might even put my own thoughts. That's a work in progress. Thank you for coming along today. And this time next week, I hope to see you on the picket line. Yeah? The embodied experience of... Sorry, where's the... I don't know if they've decided on one. Yeah. But some of us from the Spanish and Latin American Studies Department are quite active in INGS, so you're welcome to come and see us up at the footbridge. Yeah, we should. Notice that we chose a bridge. All right, so if you have me in the tutorial, I'll see you just subsequently. Thank you, everyone. Did you have a question? Yeah. Oh, yeah, you base it on one of the options. So the option is kind of the container in which you'll begin to think. Yeah? But you have to create a question in relation to that option. Or you could choose one that was already there. Yeah. So there are some suggested ones, like about...
Do you have to pass the question? Like, do we bring it to you and say...
You can check it in with me, yeah. You can check with me, definitely, if you want to. Yeah. But otherwise, include it in the portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you. The classic scenario. Let's get beyond binaries. Look, I think, James, you asked me a good question, and so I might actually bring that up in the tutorial, yeah? Just to give some examples. Hello.
I'm sorry, but I kind of wanted to. I had a couple questions.
Mm-hmm.
My essay.
Sure.